Hello everyone and welcome to another watercolor tutorial video. In today's video I show you the process of one of my watercolor studies I created for my Patreon illustration reward. For the month of February I chose to depict the photos that I took last year when we visited Rome. I was so inspired because in February we had some glimpses of sunlight, which were like a little preview of how the spring and the summer will look like this year. And I got immediately taken back to our trips to Rome and Sicily, and I remembered how beautiful they were. I am looking forward to visit Italy and other destinations this year too, but I still have to wait a little bit. And in order to get me into vacation mood, I decided to paint these beautiful pictures that reminded me so much of our vacation. The people that I met there were extremely kind and helpful to us tourists who couldn't speak the language and who were probably very annoying, like many tourists are, but the Italian people were incredibly attentive and everyone seemed to be in a good mood, which is completely the opposite in Germany. Here most people are very grumpy actually. They have no reason to be like that, but they are. So it's always a very huge difference when I visit other countries, and I am super grateful to have been able to visit Italy. Anyways, I stop rambling now and let's start the tutorial. For my study I used hot pressed Fabriano paper and I taped it down onto a wooden sheet. Because I enjoy the coloring process a lot more than the drawing process, and because I also have very tight schedule, I trace most of my paintings instead of drawing them, except for more imaginative artworks. Those I prefer to draw obviously because I have more freedom, but for realistic artworks that I want to depict exactly like the photograph, I really think that tracing is the best method for this, at least if you are on a tight schedule and you want to be very productive. However, if you like to draw it, it's probably more fun and it helps you learn more about proportions and about the subject that you draw. So don't feel that you have to do it like I do. Do it in this way that it brings you the most happiness. Anyways, and as always, you can find all materials down in the description. Okay, so I started this study by filling out the largest areas of the painting. There are not a lot of largest areas and I could have pretty much started probably everywhere, but I decided to fill in the midtones like the gray areas of the statues and the facade of the houses behind the statue, and I picked natural tones. I used a lot of indigo blue, ivory black, burnt sienna and yellow ochre for mixing most of the colors that you see in the picture. Then, while everything was still wet, I mixed darker tones and already set the darkest tones in the painting. Not only does it create beautiful blending effects when you apply a wet on wet technique, it also helps me to determine which values I have to pay attention to. When I have the darkest value established already and some midtones, I find it easier to mix the colors and the values in general. Most of the times, however, I tend to paint way too light with watercolors, but I found a trick for that, guys. Having the reference photo next to your painting, like this one, is the very best way to get the perfect values. I created 3 of these studies actually, and all 3 of them had really good values. Whenever I have my reference photo on the laptop and not directly next to the painting, I never get the right values, but having it next to the painting is the best way to get the most accurate values. I can just squint my eyes and both pictures become blurry and I can immediately see on which areas I have to get darker or lighter. I also really enjoyed using different kinds of brushes for this study. I didn't want to recreate the photo exactly. I did want to get the values very accurate and the colors, but I wanted to have beautiful loose brush strokes that give the study an interesting character and make it very painterly. I find this makes watercolor painting so interesting and fascinating. So I used flat brushes to make kind of frazzled looking patterns, and I juxtaposed them with the more wavy brush strokes that the rounded tip brush creates. I'm really a fan of abstract artworks lately and super thick paint and all of this good stuff, and doing it myself is more difficult, of course, than I anticipated it. But for this watercolor study, I believe it worked very well, and using those different kinds of brushes played a major role in it. So I try to use the flat brush whenever I find rather straight lines or maybe shredded patterns on the study, like the rock where this mermaid sits on, and also when I painted the architecture in the background, the flat brush was very useful too. For the shadows of her body and the body of the statue in the background, I used the rounded tip brush because there I needed more round and feminine curves, if you can say that. I don't know. After having added more darker parts to the painting, like the entry door in the distance or the black windows and some of the shades in the rock under the mermaid, I continued with adding more of the darker midtones and on refining the details. I believe that with only a couple of simple shapes, a scenery like this can be depicted very beautifully. So I didn't plan to render it perfectly. So after having added more of the darker midtones, I painted small but important details, like the gaps between the stones of the doorway. Next, I concentrated on the values again. I find it rather easy to paint all the details and maybe add the major colors that I find on the reference photo, but getting the values right is a little bit more difficult, and most of the time I tend to paint my watercolor paintings way lighter than my reference photo. So I squinted my eyes and looked on my setup, and then I added a couple of washes over areas that I found were too light. For example, the whole statues. I left them completely white. It was just the white of the paper, but in fact when I looked on my reference photo, it wasn't white at all. It was a really light gray. So of course I had to add a very light gray layer on top of my statues. I continued this process and looked where I could find more values that I had to correct, and in the end, after I was happy with the values, I took a little bit of white gouache paint and added little water drops in front of the rock and some small tiny waves in the water of the fountain. And then I was already finished. This study was really quick. In fact, it took me only 1 hour and 20 minutes, and I enjoyed every minute of it. I think because it was really new for me to paint something like that. I didn't have any idea how the final artwork would look. I didn't make myself any pressure, because when I paint subjects that I have painted already hundreds of times, I have a strong idea of how they're supposed to look, and this is actually not very good if you want to create artworks. I believe if the artwork surprises you in the end, it's a good artwork. Of course, also if you happen to like it. So with these studies that I created, I'm kind of surprised and I'm really happy about them. Let me know how you like them. I hope I can visit Italy and also various other countries this year and the following years too, and I will make a lot of pictures that I can then turn into little studies or even larger paintings. Also, if you want to see my full painting process in real time, I just released a 1 hour and 20 minutes long real-time video without voiceover of this watercolor study on Patreon. Get access to this and over 70 painting videos and lessons for only $10. Go to patreon.com/Lioba Brückner and join today. And if you want to learn more, I have lots of tutorials and real-time lessons available for you on my Patreon site, in which I teach you my technique in detail and step by step. In many of my videos you even get to see my mixing process in a second camera window, and you can download the reference photo too. On top of that, all videos are downloadable and you can keep them forever. For just $5 a month, you get instant access to over 70 painting videos. That's pretty neat, right? And for only $10 you get access to another whole whole library of unrated but even longer real-time videos of all my recent artworks. If you have seen some of my works and you always wondered how I did them, then this pledge is the right one for you. Just visit my website and browse the tutorial section. There you will find a list of all lessons and real-time videos available. And for the extra portion of art, you might even fancy the art surprise tier. For only $5 more, I send you a beautiful set of 3 unique art gifts each month. I chose the best artworks and illustrations that I created and turned them into beautiful magnets, stickers and postcards, which are not only wonderful decorations for your home, but also are rare collectibles, because once I send them out, they won't be available anywhere else and I don't reprint them. So get your Art Surprises package this month. So what are you waiting for? Up your painting game and join me now on patreon.com/Lioba Brückner. I also want to show you the winners of my painting challenge from February. The theme was love and poems, and I was blown away by the extremely skillful and beautiful masterpieces that my patrons sent me. So have a look at those beautiful artworks. The first place goes to this masterpiece by Julian. Look how amazing she painted the hair and how stunning she incorporated the decor elements into the realistic background. Her painting depicts Dido from an ancient Roman poem, and her interpretation is really beautiful. And now let's have a look at the other wonderful submissions too. That's it guys, I hope you liked this video and you found it helpful, and if you did, don't forget to leave a comment, give the video a thumbs up, and if you like my channel, subscribe to my channel too. I hope I see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day, bye bye!